Professor Landsberg, both presidents were speaking to the Africa Peace Mission that is made up of some heads of state from the continent. Vladimir Putin waiving the purported peace deal, and you've got Volodymyr Zelensky speaking of isolation. Your interpretation of what we heard from the two leaders and the tone of where the situation is going?
Yeah, in a sense, I'm not surprised. I suppose we have to understand that our president has to utter the words that it was a successful visit. I suppose in one sense it was a success. It's not the first time that the idea of peace talks have been muted by anybody. But it's certainly the first time that a delegation, this time around, an African delegation, went to see the two main protagonists. But we must remember that these two protagonists are backed by powerful actors. We now have a clear sense where they stand on the peace. And one way of interpreting is to say, was one of them going to back down? Let me put it in the form of a question. Was President Zelensky going to agree to any peace negotiations right now, mindful of the fact that his antagonists on the other side expect him to surrender the territory that they've gained so far? Similarly, and vice versa, would President Putin agree to NATO's demands that they will only talk if he gives up the territory gained so far? And it seems to me that is the real stalemate here. In short, the one wants to restore the sovereignty of Ukraine as it was before it happened on the war started on the 24th of February last year, President Zelensky. The other one wants a permanently neutral zone, a cordon, an area that would permanently prevent NATO and other states that he would see as aggressors from coming close to Russia. I'm not surprised that they are so far from peace at this stage.
The hostile reception of the South African delegation in the form of the President's Protection Services, as well as the media contingent from the country, has almost overshadowed these peace talks. You've also got the Democratic Alliance in the country seeking answers.
Let me comment on two things, and I'm glad you raised it. There are a number of scenarios. One is it was hastily arranged, and the Polish very well might not have received all the names of the delegations on there. But I must say to you, even if that's the case, given the importance of the mission, at least according to the Africans, I think the Polish should have done much, much more to resolve the issue. And I think the South Africans and other Africans will be within their right to ask some very serious questions to the Poles and actually ask whether this was not sabotage. But I actually want to come to your second point, because I think for me this is a serious point, and I haven't heard other analysts or media contingent asking this. And I must say this to the Democratic Alliance and its leader. It's almost like they're exploiting this crisis that South Africa finds itself in as far as the war is concerned. And I want to say to Mr. Steenhuisen, who seems to harbor some presidential ambitions himself, that no matter from which state you are, if you are a head of state, you have to travel with security personnel, especially if you go into a war zone. And for the DA to go to the extent and almost get a kick out of the brandishing of these weapons and ask questions about their bounds, and they're going to ask them, I actually say to the DA, that verges on a violation of the national security of the country. They should actually seriously think about taking a step back from there. No president in the world, there is no head of state who enters another country, even on a peaceful visit, without taking weapons with it. That is just intelligence and peace and security 101. And if they want, go and read the Vienna Convention of 1961, where these things are spelled out. They're blowing this thing up, almost trying maliciously to make a link between the Lady R thing and saga, and now the fact that the president traveled with weapons. I don't have to know this, and nobody has to share this kind of intel with me, but every time our president goes abroad, or a counterpart like President Museveni comes to our country, they do come with weapons, but that it has to be cleared by the host country is indeed true.
While the issue of the Presidential Protection Services is one issue, you've got on the other side the media contingent that was also on that flight that was not able to give the other side of the story. And so almost from the perspective of the South African media at least, we were not then able to get a first-hand experience of either hearing the shellings or anything that actually happened in the two nations. What is your interpretation of that?
Yeah, most unfortunate, and there certainly is need for a proper inquiry. I just want to be clear, not another commission of inquiry. That's not what I'm suggesting. I think it is unfortunate, and if it does come down to almost a sloppiness, tardiness, where the names of every single body on that plane was not forwarded to the Polish embassy at home and then furnished to Warsaw in time, most unfortunate. And at its worst, what it does seem to suggest, though, that this Lady R issue is becoming such a deep crisis in not just in our foreign relations, but in South Africa, because there is a view that it is after the president was flat-footed when asked the question about why taking so long on revealing information, that the idea of an African peace mission coming out. I think it's most unfortunate. Very media, lots of media houses, I suppose your own as well, they would know the details about whether they send the information on time and so on. But this thing is really becoming an unpleasant saga in South Africa's foreign relations, and I never thought the day would come when a foreign policy issue would detain us for so long, and the ramifications and consequences, apart from the possibilities of sanctions and the like, it's even now resulting in this kind of thing where civil society actors, the media and like, are caught in the middle of this thing, and there's need for deep reflection by South Africa on how it conducts its international relations and diplomacy.
Professor Chris Landsberg, Sachi Chair of African Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you very much for your time this morning.